We all want to show up better in our conversations. Whether it's a coaching call, a team meeting, or just talking to a friend. But the truth is, most people approach conversations like equations. Here's my problem, what's the solution? The most powerful conversations just don't work that way. They don't follow these steps, they follow a rhythm. And the moment I learned that, everything fell into place. Have you ever walked away from a conversation and thought, why didn't that land the way I hoped it would? I've spent over 15 years as a software engineer, leading projects, managing teams, mentoring people through complex learning curves. And for most of that time, I approached conversations like a problem to solve. If someone brought me a question, I felt like my job was to have the answer. But I've learned that's not what actually creates breakthroughs. Most people walk into conversations thinking they need to have that right answer, or the perfect story, or some other clever way to prove their value. But when you're focused on what you're going to say next, you miss what's happening right in front of you. And sometimes the most important moments, the ones that shift everything, only happen when you stop trying to be impressive and start being present. Drop a comment below. What's one thing you wish you could show up more fully in conversations for? Maybe it's listening without planning that reply, or feeling confident enough to say what you really mean. Whatever it is, I'd love to hear about it. And when you stop searching for that perfect thing to say next, something unexpected is bound to show up. I wake up about 30 minutes before the call. It's my first one-on-one session with Steven, my YouTube coach, and I'm reviewing everything I pulled together the night before. This is the first time I'm actually bringing something into the session that I worked on, real work that I've done, the opportunity for real feedback. I open my notebook and flip to the Ikigai section. What do you love to do? What does the world need? What can you be paid for? What are you good at? Each of the last 3 questions has maybe 3 or 4 bullet points attached to it. But that first one, what do you love to do? I just stare at it. It's a lot. I dumped out 20 answers last night, full spaghetti mode. I wasn't trying to be neat or precise. I just needed something to react to in this call. It was kind of stream of consciousness really, so I let it pour out, closed the notebook, went off to bed. But now in the morning light, these answers feel different. That first list is completely out of, alignment with the others. And as I look at it, I feel this need to simplify, to condense. So I scan the page, circling anything that stands out, not overthinking. It just feels like this first list is way too bloated. And somehow 4 categories arise to the surface: dream, dance, design, develop. They're concise, they roll off the tongue, and they feel like a solid summary of everything I'd written the night before for that first question. Now, every Ikigai question has those 3 or 4 answers, nice and even, which means I can spend less time pontificating and explaining and more time asking Steven what he sees and getting real value. So I jot them down as quickly as they came to me that morning, close the notebook, and I log on to the call. Steven and I start with my core values. That part feels strong. I've already narrowed them down from a long list to my top 6. Then I narrow them down again to my one primary value. I walk him through the logic behind each choice, and I can tell it's landing. I'm feeling real steady at this point of the conversation. Then we shift over to the Ikigai section, and I'm a little more unsure here. I tell him I've answered all 4 questions, but one of them was a little overloaded. I explained that this first prompt, what do you love to do, got a bit out of hand. So I show him how I tried to clean it up, how I took those 20 items and broke them into categories: dream, dance, design, develop. I say it kind of offhandedly. Just trying to, summarize the list so that we can move forward because there's a lot to go over. So we do keep going. I walk him through the rest of those Ikigai questions and bullet points that I answered. What I'm good at, what I can be paid for, what the world needs. And by the time I finish, I admit I'm still not sure how it all connects, really. That's when Stephen starts offering these quiet reflections my way. He talks about the idea of a flywheel, how clarity doesn't just come from finding the right words, but from noticing the rhythm of those words, the way each answer leads into the next. And something in that metaphor cracks open a door in my mind. I glance back at those 4 words: dream, dance, design, develop. And suddenly, they're not just categories anymore. They're in order. They're alive. They're a system. A rhythm, actually. And I realize they're not just the answer to what I love to do. They're the answer to every question. Each one tied to a separate question I didn't know I'd already answered in those 4 categories. It's like the piece I'd been waiting for just fell into place. That realization didn't come from trying to be impressive in a conversation. It didn't come from having the right answers going into it. It came because I let myself show up with real uncertainty, real questions. And Stephen didn't try to solve me. He danced with me. He listened. He reflected. He gave the insight just enough space to find its own rhythm. And that's the part most people miss. We think breakthrough moments happen when we prepare more, say it perfectly, plan the whole thing out. But the most powerful insights don't show up when everything's mapped out. They show up when you're open, responsive, curious, present. Insight isn't an equation. It's a rhythm. It's a response, a flow, a dance. So the next time you step into a conversation, pause for a moment. Not to prep your answer, but to center yourself. Ask, what would it look like to dance with this person? Not to teach, not to fix, just to move with them. To respond instead of to plan, to feel instead of to force. That's how the breakthroughs happen. And if part of you still wonders why it's hard to stay in that rhythm, why you keep slipping out of presence, back into old patterns, you're going to want to see what's waiting for you in the next video.